structure. Perhaps we're going there, and that's why I thought at this point my scene stops, like in a film, and fades out with essentially me thinking about back in history. So let's go back in history and see whether there are some ancient words, some words that may be very dry. I think if you read the Manifesto, it's like reading Beowulf. When you start studying English, they give you these documents from the 12th century English. It's not even English, come on, it's very archaic, very passionate, and but it's magmatic. So these words of the Manifesto are quite far from us. I had myself to read them once and then let them sink into my mind and soul, because they don't immediately say anything at all. They're quite cryptic, and it's like the good wine that has been in the bottle for many years. When you open up, you let it rest for an hour or two. Trust an Italian on this. And then you drink it. Don't do that with an old wine to open up and drink immediately. So the Manifesto has to be opened up and let it air for an hour or two. Just a small episode that on the 14th of December, the Prime Minister of my country, Berlusconi, went through a very difficult confidence vote in the Italian Parliament, 14th of December 2010. And I was listening to the declarations of the different MP, and one of them said, we want to go back to the Manifesto of Ventotene. I can show you, the man is called Maurizio Turco. He was MEP and now he's an MP. And I felt, the moment had come to do something on this, because I didn't expect that to be mentioned in 2010 in the Italian Parliament. And I guess he was the only one to mention this manifesto. Okay, end of scene 1. Scene 2, now we go back to the winter between 1940 and 1941, at the beginning of the Second World War, and we are on the island of Ventotene, that's the pronunciation. There are pictures on the internet, but they're all pictures of people who sell villas, houses, bed and breakfast. So this actually is a more faithful picture of what it was. It looks very barren, hard land island off the coast between Rome and Naples, but more off the coast of Naples, where Mussolini, the Italian dictator, sent people to solitary confinement. They were confined there. You didn't need a trial for that. It was enough to have a police officer declaring that you were disturbing or you were a subversive to get there. So now we know that this is an island where people went without having done anything except being subversive. And we start with the characters of the scene. Obviously, we know that during that time, Europe was being swept by the armies of Germany. Many established democracies like France were starting to cave in. The split of Europe envisaged by the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was about to evaporate, with a very clear intention of the Germans to invade not just Poland but then Russia as well. So it was really a difficult time to think about peace. In this context, I entered the characters of the Manifesto. I also have a truthful copy of how the Manifesto was eventually printed in 1943, but it's not here. But it's interesting to see how it was presented. It was presented as written by E.R. and A.S. And the names of these two people were, I think Katia gave you something to read, Altiero Spinelli. You may have found a site, who was then an MEP for several years, but the creator of the Treaty on the European Union, approved by the European Parliament in 1985, but never carried out to an intergovernmental conference. That was for the United States of Europe. That was his creation in 85. But Spinelli essentially was a man who had spent most of his life in jail. He knew practically nothing about the world out there, because since the early 20s, 1920, and since he was 21, and became a member of the Italian Communist Party that was created in 21, was just sent to jail, from Lucca to Ponza to then Ventotene, jail or solitary confinement for many years without the possibility to write. So he could only write on toilet paper by burning some of his food and dissolving this ash with sugar and water, and write something very flimsy on toilet paper. But he could read, obviously, and there is a description in his memoirs of how much he read. But what is important for us is that in the period in which he moved to Ventotene, he had started reading three philosophers that demolished the philosophical historiography and economics of Marxism. And these three philosophers were, well, Immanuel Kant, and I think Katia has mentioned this philosopher, an Italian philosopher, Benedetto Croce, that we don't need to know exactly what he said, and the third was T.H. Marshall, the English neoclassical actually, economist. So a bit of a marginalist theory, a bit of idealism and liberalism, and a bit of historiography, and essentially with a lot of classical political economy from the UK, managed him to change his views about communism and abandon essentially gradually communism. There are some words here in his memoirs about communists looking to him like a tragedy of humanity and like another repetition of the great Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, and certainly contrary to any idea of freedom. We find essentially a man in jail, right? A man with no contact with the outside world, a loser. I read the letters from his mom, and I remember what my mom said when I said I want to become an academic, that they were worth. They were saying, you have a lot of passion, Altiero, but you have to put your passion and energy to a productive use, because you are not getting anything in your life except then moving from one jail to another. When he went to Ventotene, he bought a book on how to fix watches, and he started getting something productive. So he repaired the watches of the guys who lived on the island. Then he had a pen with some hens, some chickens. And what else did he do? He had some potatoes and vegetables on the very hard soil of this barren island. And obviously, every night at 6 he had to go back into the dorms with the others. There are strict rules. But he could read, and he was given a pen and some notes where he could write, provided he would leave the night, the text in jail. And I start with a remark about the chickens, because there is a story here about how was this manuscript then kept away from the prison guards. And this thing that Spinelli says in his memoirs is that you know that the chickens go on these little metal tubes to rest at night, unless you have something more elaborate, more industrial. So they go there, and inside these metal tubes, Spinelli rolled the pages of the Manifesto of Ventotene, because he thought the prison guards would never check there, too dirty, too many insects and excrements from the chickens. That's one legend that he narrates. In another book, I found that the Manifesto was written on cigarette rolling papers. This is more unlikely to be believed, because that cigarette must have been very, very long.